The morning sun cast long shadows across the Marine Corps training facility at 29 Palms as Staff Sergeant Maya Rodriguez adjusted the scope on her rifle for the third time. Around her, 12 of the Navy's finest SEAL snipers were setting up their equipment with the kind of precise, methodical movements that came from years of life-or-death situations. Maya could feel their eyes on her. Not hostile exactly, but curious in the way soldiers got when they encountered something unexpected. She was the only woman in the group, the only Marine among Navy personnel, and most obviously to anyone watching, the only person carrying what looked like a civilian hunting rifle instead of military-grade equipment. "That's an interesting choice of weapon, Staff Sergeant," said Chief Petty Officer Jake Harrison, the lead instructor for this advanced marksmanship course. His tone was neutral, professional, but Maya caught the slight emphasis on interesting that suggested he was being diplomatic. Maya looked down at her rifle. To anyone familiar with military hardware, it was indeed an odd sight. While the SEALs around her carried precision rifles worth $15,000 to $20,000 each, advanced systems with every possible upgrade and modification, Maya's weapon looked like something a weekend hunter might pick up at a sporting goods store. "Remington 700, she said simply, running her hand along the stock. "My grandfather's hunting rifle. I've made some modifications." Lieutenant Commander David Chen, who was observing the training exercise, stepped closer. Maya recognized him from the briefings. He was the commanding officer of SEAL Team 7's Sniper Section, a legend in special operations circles with over 200 confirmed kills across 3 deployments. "Modifications?" Chen asked, his eyebrows raised slightly. Maya nodded toward her rifle. "New barrel, custom trigger, upgraded stock, better scope mounts. Nothing fancy, but it shoots straight." "I'm sure it does," Chen said, though his expression suggested polite skepticism. "But we're going to be engaging targets out to 2 miles today. That's ambitious for a hunting rifle." Around them, the other snipers continued their preparations, but Maya could sense they were listening. Conversations had quieted slightly, and she noticed more than one pair of eyes glancing in her direction. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Thompson, a sniper with SEAL Team 3, was setting up what looked like a custom-built rifle that probably cost more than Maya made in 3 months. He looked over at her setup and shook his head slightly. "No offense, Staff Sergeant," Thompson said, "but extreme long-range precision shooting isn't really about making do with what you've got. It's about having the right tool for the job." "I understand that," Maya replied calmly, "but sometimes the right tool isn't always the most expensive one." Thompson exchanged a glance with the sniper next to him, Petty Officer Second Class Alex Rivera. Both men had spent their careers working with the finest equipment the military could provide, and the idea that a modified hunting rifle could compete with their precision instruments seemed almost absurd. Chief Harrison called for attention, gathering the snipers around a large map spread across a tactical table. "Gentlemen," he began, then caught himself and nodded toward Maya. "And lady, today we're conducting extreme long-range engagement exercises. We have targets set up at 1,500, 1,800, and 2,100 meters. That's just over 1.25 miles for the furthest shots." He pointed to various positions marked on the map. "Weather conditions are ideal. Light wind, good visibility, temperature steady at 72 degrees. This is about as perfect as conditions get for long-range work." Maya studied the map carefully. She had trained for shots like these before, but never in a competitive environment with some of the military's elite marksmen. The pressure was different here, not because failure meant mission compromise or loss of life, but because failure meant proving right everyone who doubted that a Marine with a modified hunting rifle belonged in this company. "The scoring system is simple," Harrison continued. "Hits in the vital zone count as full points. Near misses count for partial credit. Complete misses get 0. We'll rotate through shooting positions, and everyone gets 3 shots at each distance. Lieutenant Commander Chen stepped forward. Before we begin, I want to emphasize something. This isn't a competition between services or individuals. This is advanced training designed to push all of us beyond our comfort zones. The targets we're engaging today represent distances where every variable matters. Ammunition, rifle, scope, weather, even the shooter's heartbeat. Maya appreciated that Chen was trying to keep things professional, but she could sense the underlying current of curiosity and perhaps skepticism about her presence. These men had trained together, deployed together, and trusted each other with their lives. She was the outsider, and her unconventional equipment made her stand out even more. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Chen continued, your marksmanship scores from Marine Corps Scout Sniper School are impressive. Your instructors recommended you for this course specifically because of your performance at extended ranges. Maya nodded. She had graduated at the top of her class from Scout Sniper School, but that felt like a different world from this one. There, she had been competing primarily against other Marines. Here, she was surrounded by operators who had made impossible shots under combat conditions. The group moved to the first firing position, an elevated platform that provided a clear view of the range. Through her scope, Maya could see the targets in the distance, silhouettes that looked impossibly small even through high-powered optics. Thompson was setting up next to her, adjusting what looked like a computer attached to his rifle's rail system. Ballistic computer, he explained, noticing her interest. Calculates drop, wind drift, Coriolis effect, all the variables, takes a lot of the guesswork out. Maya nodded politely. Her rifle had none of those electronic aids. She carried a small notebook with handwritten data from hundreds of hours of practice and a basic wind meter that had belonged to her grandfather. You ever shot at these distances in combat? Rivera asked from her other side. No, Maya admitted. Longest confirmed shot was just over 800 meters. Afghanistan, 2019. These distances are different, Rivera said. Not just the drop and wind. The target actually starts to look different. Your brain plays tricks on you. Maya appreciated the advice. Rivera seemed genuinely interested in helping rather than showing off, which was more than she could say for some of the others. Chief Harrison's voice carried across the firing line. 1,500-meter targets. Take your time, make your shots count. Thompson, you're up first. Maya watched as Thompson settled behind his rifle. His movements were fluid, practiced. He spent nearly 3 minutes studying the target through his scope, making minute adjustments to his position and rifle. When he finally fired, the sound was sharp and clean. Through the spotting scopes, they could see the hit clearly marked in the target's vital zone. Center mass, Harrison called out. Nice shot. One by one, the other snipers took their turns. Most shots were solid hits. A few were near misses that still scored partial points. These men were clearly among the best marksmen in the military. Rodriguez, you're up, Harrison announced. Maya moved into position behind her rifle. Through her scope, the target seemed impossibly distant. At this range, even a perfect hit was as much about reading conditions as it was about marksmanship. She spent time studying the mirage rising from the ground between her position and the target. The heat distortion could provide valuable information about wind conditions along the bullet's path. There were subtle clues everywhere. The way grass moved near the target. The direction smoke drifted from a small fire burning on a distant hillside. Maya's notebook contained pages of data she had collected over years of practice. Bullet drop at various distances, wind drift calculations, temperature effects on ammunition performance. All of it handwritten, all of it based on extensive testing with this specific rifle and ammunition combination. She made her final adjustments and settled into her shooting position. Unlike some of the high-tech equipment around her, Maya's rifle required her to manually dial in elevation changes for different distances. She turned the elevation dial on her scope, counting clicks until she reached the setting she had calculated for this distance. The trigger on her rifle was smooth and light, the result of careful modification by a local gunsmith who had been adjusting hunting rifles for 40 years. Maya controlled her breathing, let her heart rate settle, and began her final sight picture. The shot surprised her, the way good shots always did. The trigger broke cleanly, the rifle recoiled straight back into her shoulder, and she quickly cycled the bolt to chamber another round while watching through the scope for impact. Through the spotting scopes, they could see her bullet had struck just slightly off-center, still well within the vital zone. "Solid hit," Harrison announced. "Good shooting, Staff Sergeant." Maya felt a small surge of relief. The first shot was always the most important psychologically. It established whether she belonged here or was just taking up space. As they moved to the 1,800-meter line, the conversations around her began to change slightly. The initial skepticism wasn't gone, but it was tempered now by the recognition that she could actually shoot. Several of the SEALs began asking more technical questions about her rifle and ammunition choices. "What grain bullet are you running?" asked Petty Officer James Walsh, a sniper from SEAL Team 5. 175 grain boat tail hollow points, Maya replied. "Federal gold medal match." Walsh nodded approvingly. "Good choice for this distance. I'm running 168s, but yours will probably hold velocity better." The 1,800-meter targets were noticeably more challenging. At this distance, even slight miscalculations in wind or elevation could result in complete misses. Maya watched as several of the shots from earlier hit just outside the scoring rings. When her turn came again, Maya took even more time studying conditions. The wind had shifted slightly since the first station, and she could see signs of thermal activity that would affect bullet flight. Her second shot was another solid hit, though not quite as centered as her first. Still, she was keeping pace with the group's performance, which was better than she had dared hope. "Nice consistency," Chen observed as they prepared to move to the final station. "That rifle might look basic, but you're making it work." The 2,100-meter station was where everything changed. At this distance, nearly a mile and a half, the targets looked like dots even through high-powered scopes. The bullet flight time was over 2 seconds, meaning that any movement of the target or change in wind conditions during that time could affect the shot. Maya could see why this exercise was considered extreme training even for special operations snipers. These were distances where perfect equipment and perfect technique still might not be enough without a significant element of luck. Thompson was shooting first again at this station. Maya watched as he spent nearly 5 minutes studying the target and making adjustments to his ballistic computer. When he finally fired, everyone watched through spotting scopes as his bullet impacted just outside the target entirely. "Wind got it," Thompson muttered, clearly frustrated. 2 more SEALs missed completely before Rivera managed a hit on the outer edge of the scoring ring. The extreme distance was proving to be as challenging as advertised. "This is where equipment really starts to matter," Walsh said to Maya as they waited for their turns. "At these distances, every advantage counts." Maya nodded, but she was focused on reading the conditions. Her grandfather had taught her that successful long-range shooting was 10% equipment and 90% understanding what the environment was doing to your bullet. She could see wind flags positioned at various points along the range, and each one was telling a slightly different story. The wind near their position was almost calm, but she could see stronger movement at the target end. More importantly, she could see the classic signs of thermal activity that created updrafts and downdrafts along the bullet's path. When her turn came, Maya took longer than she ever had to set up her shot. At this distance, with this rifle, she would have only one realistic chance to prove that expensive equipment wasn't always the determining factor in precision shooting. She made careful notes in her book, calculating not just the ballistic requirements, but also the wind conditions at different points along the bullet's path. The shot would require her to aim significantly higher and to the left of the target to account for bullet drop and wind drift. Maya settled behind her rifle and began her final preparations. Around her, she could sense the attention of the other snipers. This shot would either validate her presence in this group or confirm their initial skepticism about her equipment. She controlled her breathing, found her natural point of aim, and began the slow, steady trigger pull that would send her bullet on a journey of over 2 miles to a target the size of a dinner plate. The rifle fired, the sound echoing across the range. Through her scope, Maya watched as her bullet traced an invisible arc through the air, carrying with it not just copper and lead, but also her reputation among some of the military's finest marksmen. The silence that followed Maya's shot seemed to stretch forever. Through the spotting scopes, everyone watched as the bullet traced its path across the desert landscape. At this distance, there was a noticeable delay between the shot and the impact, time enough for doubt to creep in. Then, Chief Harrison's voice cut through the quiet. "Impact! Center mass hit!" The reaction among the SEAL snipers was immediate and unmistakable. Heads turned, eyebrows raised. And more than one person looked from Maya's basic rifle setup to the spotting scopes and back again. "Are you sure?" Thompson asked, moving to look through the high-powered scope himself. After a moment, he straightened up, his expression a mixture of surprise and respect. "Well, I'll be damned. Dead center." Lieutenant Commander Chen walked over to Maya, who was still lying behind her rifle. "Staff Sergeant, that was an exceptional shot. At 2,100 meters with those wind conditions, that's the kind of shooting that gets talked about for years." Maya felt a flush of pride but tried to keep her expression neutral. "Thank you, sir. The conditions were actually pretty good once you read them right." Rivera, who had been studying her target through another spotting scope, shook his head slowly. "I've been doing this for 8 years, and I've only made a handful of shots that good at this distance. What's your secret?" Maya sat up and pulled out her small notebook. The pages were filled with handwritten calculations, weather observations, and shooting data accumulated over hundreds of practice sessions. "My grandfather taught me that every rifle has its own personality," she explained. "This one's been in my family for 20 years. I know exactly how it shoots in different conditions because I've tested it in everything from snow to desert heat." Walsh leaned over to look at her notebook. "You hand calculate all this?" "Most of it," Maya confirmed. "I have a few basic tools, but mostly it's about understanding what the environment is doing to the bullet." Thompson was examining her rifle more closely now, with the kind of professional interest that replaced his earlier skepticism. "What modifications did you make to the trigger?" "Local gunsmith back home in Arizona," Maya said. "Guy named Pete Morales. He's been working on hunting rifles since before I was born. Took the pull down to 2.5 pounds, cleaned up the break." "And the barrel?" Chen asked. "Custom match barrel from a small shop in Montana. Nothing fancy, but it's properly bedded and free-floated. Shoots half-minute groups consistently." As they packed up from the 2,100-meter station, Maya noticed the dynamic of the group had shifted. The initial polite distance had been replaced by genuine professional curiosity. These men were accomplished marksmen, and they recognized skill when they saw it, regardless of the equipment being used. Chief Harrison called everyone together as they walked back toward the main building. "Outstanding shooting today, everyone. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, particularly impressive work at the longer distances. Your technique is solid." The debriefing session took place in a classroom adjacent to the range. Charts on the walls showed ballistic tables, weather reading techniques, and photos of various target configurations. Maya found herself sitting in the center of the group rather than off to one side, as the other snipers continued asking questions about her methods. "The thing that impressed me," Rivera said during the discussion, was how long you took to read conditions. Most shooters, especially with good equipment, tend to rush the environmental assessment. Maya nodded. My grandfather always said that patience is the difference between good shooters and great ones. He spent 30 years hunting elk in Colorado, making shots at distances where you only get one chance. Was he military? Chen asked. Vietnam, Maya replied. Marine Scout Sniper. 2 tours, 1968 to 1970. He never talked much about it, but he taught me everything I know about reading wind and understanding how bullets behave at distance. The room was quiet for a moment. Several of the SEALs exchanged glances, recognizing the significance of that legacy. Thompson leaned forward in his chair. What's the longest shot you've ever made? In training or combat? Maya asked. Both. Training, about 2,400 meters. Combat, 830 meters. Afghanistan, 2019. Tell us about the combat shot, Walsh requested. Maya hesitated. Combat experiences were personal, and she wasn't sure how much to share with people she barely knew. But these were operators who understood the weight of those moments. Taliban sniper, she said finally. He had been taking shots at our convoy for 2 days. We couldn't pin down his position because he was moving between hide sites. Finally got a visual on him from an overwatch position. She paused, remembering the heat, the tension, the pressure of knowing that missing meant continued danger for her unit. 830 meters. Crosswind uphill shot. He was in a window, partially concealed. Had to wait for him to expose enough of himself to make the shot count. How long did you wait? Rivera asked. 4.5 hours, Maya replied. From dawn until just before noon. He finally shifted position to get a better angle on our vehicles. One shot. One shot, Maya confirmed. He never knew what hit him. The room was completely silent now. These men had all made similar shots under similar circumstances, and they understood the mental and emotional weight that came with them. Chen looked at his watch. We have about an hour before the afternoon session. Who wants to grab lunch? As they walked toward the mess hall, Walsh fell into step beside Maya. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. When I saw your setup this morning, I figured you were here to check a box, maybe get a certificate to hang on a wall back at your unit. I understand the reaction, Maya said. My equipment does look out of place here. It's not just the equipment, Walsh continued. We see people come through these courses who are great on paper but can't perform when it matters. What you did out there this morning, especially that last shot, that's not luck. That's years of dedicated practice. I appreciate that. Can I ask you something? Walsh said as they entered the mess hall. Sure. Why the Marine Corps? With your skills, you could probably have gone Navy, ended up in one of our sniper sections. Maya smiled. Family tradition. My father and grandfather were both Marines. Plus, I like the challenge of making do with less. The Marine Corps doesn't always have the newest or most expensive equipment, so we learn to maximize what we have. During lunch, Maya found herself at the center of a technical discussion about long-range shooting techniques. The conversation ranged from ammunition selection to scope-mounting systems to the psychological aspects of extreme distance shooting. The thing people don't realize, Thompson said between bites of his sandwich, is that at these distances, you're not really aiming at the target. You're aiming at where you calculate the target will be when your bullet gets there. Exactly, Maya agreed. And you're accounting for things like the rotation of the Earth, air density changes, even the temperature difference between your barrel and the ambient air. Chen had been listening to the conversation with interest. Staff Sergeant, I'm curious about your long-term goals. Are you planning to stay in the Marine Corps? Yes, sir, Maya replied without hesitation. I'm coming up on my second re-enlistment, planning to make it a career. Have you considered trying out for Marine Forces Special Operations Command? Rivera asked. Your skills would fit right in with their reconnaissance units. Maya had thought about it. MARSOC was the Marine Corps' Special Operations component, and their reconnaissance teams often operated in small units where individual marksmanship skills were critical. "I've considered it," she admitted. "Right now, I'm focused on being the best regular infantry Marine I can be. Maybe special operations later." Chief Harrison appeared at their table carrying a radio. "Sorry to interrupt lunch, but we have a situation developing. There's been a change to this afternoon's training schedule." Chen looked up from his food. "What kind of change?" "We just received word that there's a group of VIPs coming to observe this afternoon's training. Some Pentagon officials and a few foreign military liaisons. They specifically requested to see extreme long-range demonstrations." Thompson groaned. "Dog and pony showtime." "It's more than that," Harrison continued. "They want to see shooting at the maximum range of our facility, the 3,000-meter targets." The table went quiet. 3,000 meters was nearly 2 miles, at the very edge of what was considered possible with conventional rifle systems. "Those targets aren't set up regularly," Walsh pointed out, "and the success rate even for our best shooters is maybe 20% on a good day." "I understand," Harrison said. "But these are decision-makers who control funding for advanced weapons programs. They want to see what's possible with current technology and training." Maya felt a knot forming in her stomach. 3,000 meters was beyond anything she had ever attempted, even in practice. At that distance, her basic equipment would be at a severe disadvantage compared to the high-tech systems the SEALs were using. Chen seemed to read her thoughts. "Staff Sergeant, you don't have to participate in this demonstration if you're not comfortable. This is well beyond normal training parameters." "With respect, sir," Maya said carefully. "If the other shooters are attempting it, I'd like to try as well." "Maya," Rivera said quietly, 3,000 meters is different. I've only successfully engaged targets at that distance a handful of times, and that was with every technological advantage we could stack in our favor." Maya understood their concern, but she also understood what declining would mean. She had earned their respect this morning, but backing down from the ultimate challenge would undermine everything she had accomplished. "I appreciate the concern," she said, "but I didn't come here to play it safe." Harrison looked around the table. "All right then, we need to be on the range in 30 minutes. The VIPs will arrive at 1400 hours. As they prepared to leave the mess hall, Thompson caught up with Maya. "Listen, I know you want to try this, but there's something you should understand about those 3,000-meter shots." "What's that?" "At that distance, everything matters exponentially more. A 1-degree difference in temperature can throw your shot off by 6 inches. A slight miscalculation in wind can mean missing the target entirely." Maya nodded. "I understand." "Do you?" Thompson asked seriously. "Because at that distance with your equipment, you're going to be at a significant disadvantage. The ballistic computers, the advanced optics, the specialized ammunition, all of that matters more when you're pushing the absolute limits." Maya looked at him steadily. "Are you trying to talk me out of this?" Thompson was quiet for a moment. "No," he said finally. "Actually, I'm kind of curious to see what you can do. That shot this morning was impressive as hell. If anyone can make a basic rifle work at 3,000 meters, it might be you." As they walked back toward the range, Maya could see additional vehicles arriving. Black SUVs with government plates and a few military vehicles she didn't recognize. The VIP observation was clearly a bigger deal than Chief Harrison had initially indicated. "Nervous?" Walsh asked as they collected their equipment. "Terrified," Maya admitted with a smile. "But that's nothing new." The 3,000-meter range was located in a different section of the facility, with targets positioned on a distant ridge that looked impossibly far away even with the naked eye. Maya set up her equipment while trying not to think about the fact that her next shot would be observed by people who could potentially affect military weapons procurement for years to come. Through her scope, the target looked like a barely visible speck. At this distance, even with high magnification. She was essentially aiming at a dot that might or might not actually be the target. Maya opened her notebook to the section where she had recorded data from her longest practice shots. The calculations required for 3,000 meters were beyond anything she had tested, which meant she would be extrapolating based on shorter distance data and hoping her understanding of ballistics was accurate. Around her, the SEAL snipers were setting up their high-tech equipment with the kind of methodical precision that came from years of operating at the edge of what was possible. Electronic ballistic computers were calculating atmospheric conditions, advanced rangefinders were providing exact distances to the target, and specialized ammunition was being selected based on optimal performance characteristics. Maya had her grandfather's rifle, a basic calculator, and 20 years of family knowledge about making impossible shots with ordinary equipment. The VIPs were arriving, taking positions behind the firing line where they could observe without interfering. Maya could hear fragments of conversation about weapons programs, budget allocations, and technological advantages. Chief Harrison called for attention. "Gentlemen and Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, this afternoon we're demonstrating the absolute limits of current sniper capabilities. The targets are positioned at 3,000 meters, nearly 2 miles. These shots represent the edge of what's possible with conventional rifle systems." Maya took a deep breath and began her final preparations. In a few minutes, she would either validate everything her grandfather had taught her about marksmanship, or she would fail spectacularly in front of some of the most important people in military weapons development. Either way, there was no backing down now. The afternoon sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon as Maya settled behind her rifle for what would be the most challenging shot of her career. 3,000 meters stretched before her like an impossible canyon of variables: wind, temperature, humidity, air pressure, and the subtle effects of Earth's rotation, all conspiring to make accurate shooting nearly impossible. Behind her, she could hear the quiet conversations of the VIP observers. Pentagon officials, foreign military attachés, and defense contractors who held the purse strings for the next generation of military sniper systems. Their presence added weight to every action on the firing line. Maya opened her notebook to a fresh page and began making calculations. At 3,000 meters, her bullet would be in flight for nearly 4 seconds. During that time, wind conditions could change, thermal currents could shift, and even minor atmospheric variations could turn a perfect shot into a complete miss. Through her scope, the target was barely visible as a small, dark spot against the distant ridge. Her grandfather's rifle, which had performed so admirably at shorter distances, now felt almost primitive compared to the technological marvels deployed around her. To her left, Petty Officer Thompson was interfacing with a ballistic computer that looked like it belonged in a spacecraft. The device was calculating hundreds of variables in real time, providing firing solutions updated to the second based on wind sensors positioned at intervals across the range. "Atmospheric pressure is holding steady," Thompson announced to no one in particular. "Temperature gradient shows a 2-degree difference between muzzle and target. Wind is variable between 5 and 8 knots, predominantly left to right." Maya made notes in her book, translating Thompson's electronic data into the manual calculations she would need. Without the benefit of real-time computers, she had to rely on observation and mathematical formulas her grandfather had taught her decades ago. Lieutenant Commander Chen approached her position. "Staff Sergeant, I want to make sure you understand there's no shame in sitting this one out. 3,000 meters is extreme even for our most experienced operators." Maya looked up from her calculations. "I appreciate the concern, sir, but I'd like to give it a try." Chen studied her for a moment. "What's your hit probability assessment at this distance?" Maya considered the question honestly. With perfect conditions and her best shooting, she might have a 15% chance of hitting the target. The SEALs with their advanced equipment probably had success rates around 30 to 40%. "Low," she admitted. but not 0. Fair enough, Chen said. Take your time. There's no rush. Maya returned to her preparations, aware that the VIP observers were growing impatient. She could hear fragments of their conversations as they discussed the demonstration and its implications for future weapons procurement. The question is whether human skill can compensate for technological limitations, one voice was saying. In real combat situations, do we invest in better equipment or better training? Both, ideally, came the reply. But if we have to choose, technology provides more consistent results. Maya tried to block out the conversation and focus on the task at hand. She studied the mirage patterns rising from the ground between her position and the target, looking for clues about wind conditions at different points along the bullet's path. The wind flags positioned at various distances were telling different stories. Near her position, the flags indicated light and variable winds. At the midpoint of the range, they showed stronger and more consistent left-to-right movement. Near the target, the conditions appeared almost calm. Maya made careful notes about each observation, building a mental map of what her bullet would encounter during its 4-second journey. Unlike the electronic systems being used by the SEALs, her method required understanding the pattern of conditions rather than getting precise measurements. Chief Harrison's voice cut through the afternoon air. First shooter, you're cleared to engage when ready. Petty Officer Rivera was first up. Maya watched as he spent nearly 10 minutes interfacing with his ballistic computer, making minute adjustments based on real-time data feeds. When he finally settled behind his rifle, his movements were deliberate and confident. The shot echoed across the range, and everyone watched through spotting scopes as the bullet traced its path toward the distant target. After what seemed like an eternity, the impact was visible in the dirt several feet below the target. Miss, low, Harrison called out. Good windage, elevation was off. Rivera shook his head as he cleared his rifle. Thermal gradient threw it off. Computer calculated for standard atmospheric lapse rate, but there's an inversion layer about halfway to target. Maya made a note about Rivera's observation. The thermal inversion would affect her bullet as well, but she would have to estimate its effect rather than measure it precisely. Thompson was next. His shot was closer, impacting just to the left of the target. Walsh followed with a shot that hit the outer edge of the target area, scoring partial points, but not the center hit that represented true success at this distance. One by one, the SEAL snipers took their shots. The results were mixed. Several complete misses, a few impacts in the target area, and one solid hit from Petty Officer James Walsh that drew approving comments from the observers. As Maya's turn approached, she finalized her calculations. The math was complex, requiring her to account for bullet drop of nearly 40 feet, wind drift that could vary significantly along the bullet's path, and the Coriolis effect caused by Earth's rotation. Her notebook showed elevation adjustments that seemed almost absurd. To hit a target 3,000 meters away, she would need to aim approximately 15 feet high and 12 feet to the right, trusting that gravity, wind, and atmospheric conditions would guide her bullet to its intended destination. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, you're up, Harrison announced. Maya moved into position behind her rifle, acutely aware of the attention focused on her. The VIP observers had noticed her unconventional equipment, and she could hear quiet discussions about the wisdom of attempting extreme-range shots with civilian-grade hardware. Through her scope, the target was barely distinguishable from the surrounding terrain. At maximum magnification, she could see a dark shape that she hoped was the target, but at this distance, even small scope adjustments could mean aiming at the wrong object entirely. Maya began the methodical process of setting up her shot. Unlike the electronic systems used by the SEALs, her rifle required manual adjustment of the scope's elevation and windage settings. She turned the elevation dial, counting clicks as she dialed in the massive correction needed to account for bullet drop at 3,000 meters. 58 clicks up. she murmured to herself, double-checking her calculations. 12 clicks right for wind. The adjustments were so extreme that she was essentially aiming at empty sky, trusting mathematics and experience to guide her bullet down to the target nearly 2 miles away. Maya settled into her shooting position and began the careful process of reading final conditions. The wind flags were still showing the same general pattern she had observed earlier, but at this distance, even subtle changes could affect the shot significantly. She controlled her breathing and found her natural point of aim. The crosshairs in her scope were positioned well above and to the right of where she could see the target, a testament to the extreme ballistic requirements of the shot. Behind her, Maya could hear the quiet conversations of the observers. Someone was discussing the theoretical limitations of conventional rifle systems, while another voice questioned whether the demonstration was realistic or just showmanship. At these distances, one of the VIP observers was saying, "Success becomes more about luck than skill. The variables are simply too complex for human calculation." Maya tried to block out the conversation and focus on the shot. Her grandfather had taught her that successful extreme-range shooting required absolute confidence in your calculations and total commitment to the process, regardless of external pressure. She made one final check of her scope settings and settled into her final shooting position. The trigger on her rifle was familiar and comfortable, the result of thousands of practice shots and careful modification by a craftsman who understood the importance of consistent trigger break. Maya controlled her breathing and began the slow, steady pressure that would release the shot. At this distance, any movement or inconsistency in her shooting technique would be magnified dramatically by the time the bullet reached its target. The rifle fired, the sound echoing across the range as her bullet began its journey through nearly 2 miles of desert air. Maya quickly cycled the bolt and returned to her scope, watching for any sign of impact while trying to read the trace of her bullet's path through the mirage. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. At 3,000 meters, there was a significant delay between shot and impact. Time enough for doubt and second-guessing to creep in. Then Chief Harrison's voice cut through the quiet. "Stand by! Checking impact!" Through the high-powered spotting scopes, the observers watched as Harrison confirmed the bullet's impact point. Maya held her breath, knowing that the next words would either validate everything she had worked for or confirm the skeptics' doubts about her unconventional approach. "Impact!" Harrison announced. "Center mass hit!" The reaction was immediate and electric. The SEAL snipers around her erupted in surprised exclamations, while the VIP observers leaned forward to get their own look through the spotting scopes. "Are you sure?" one of the Pentagon officials asked, disbelief clear in his voice. Thompson was already at a spotting scope, verifying the hit. "Confirmed," he called out. "Dead center. That's one hell of a shot." Lieutenant Commander Chen walked over to Maya, who was still lying behind her rifle in something approaching shock. "Staff Sergeant, that was an extraordinary demonstration of marksmanship. In 15 years of special operations, I've witnessed very few shots of that caliber." Maya sat up slowly, still processing what had just happened. Around her, the SEAL snipers were gathering to examine her rifle and notebook, professional curiosity overcoming any remaining skepticism about her methods. "How did you calculate for the thermal inversion?" Rivera asked, flipping through her notebook. Maya pointed to a section of her calculations. "I didn't measure it directly, but when you missed low earlier, I adjusted my elevation to account for what seemed like a temperature gradient issue." Walsh shook his head admiringly. "You adjusted your firing solution based on someone else's miss? That's fieldcraft at the highest level." The VIP observers were having their own animated discussion about what they had just witnessed. Maya could hear fragments of conversation about human factors, training effectiveness, and the value of fundamental marksmanship skills versus technological solutions. "Gentlemen," Chen announced to the group, "this concludes our demonstration. What you've seen today represents the pinnacle of current sniper capabilities, achieved through a combination of advanced equipment and exceptional individual skill. One of the Pentagon officials approached Maya as she was packing up her equipment. "Staff Sergeant, I'm Colonel Patricia Martinez, Office of the Secretary of Defense. That was quite a demonstration." "Thank you, ma'am," Maya replied, uncertain about how to respond to such high-level attention. "I'm curious about your background," Martinez continued. "Your personnel file shows exceptional marksmanship scores, but nothing that predicted what we just witnessed." Maya thought for a moment. "Ma'am, I think what you saw was the result of 20 years of learning from my grandfather, combined with thousands of hours of practice. The equipment matters, but understanding the fundamentals matters more." Martinez nodded thoughtfully. "Would you be interested in additional training opportunities, perhaps some advanced courses that might better utilize your skills?" "I'm always interested in learning, ma'am," Maya said carefully. As the VIP group departed, Maya found herself surrounded by the SEAL snipers who had initially greeted her with polite skepticism. The dynamic had completely changed. She was now clearly accepted as an equal, someone whose skills transcended the equipment she carried. "I owe you an apology," Thompson said as they walked back toward the main building. "When I saw your setup this morning, I made assumptions about what you could accomplish. That was unfair and unprofessional." "No apology needed," Maya replied. "I understand the reaction. My equipment does look out of place in this company." "It's not about the equipment," Walsh interjected. "What you did today, that 3,000-meter shot, that's not equipment. That's pure skill and understanding of the craft." Chen joined their conversation as they reached the building. "Staff Sergeant, I want to discuss some opportunities with you. SEAL Team 7 occasionally works with Marine units on joint operations. We could use someone with your capabilities." Maya felt a surge of pride at the recognition, but she also understood the significance of what was being offered. These men didn't make such suggestions lightly. "I appreciate that, sir," she said. "I'm committed to the Marine Corps, but I'm always interested in opportunities to work with professionals like yourselves." As they entered the debriefing room, Maya reflected on how much had changed since the morning. She had arrived as an outsider with questionable equipment, trying to prove she belonged among some of the military's elite marksmen. She was leaving as a recognized expert whose unconventional approach had opened eyes at the highest levels of military leadership. Rivera sat down beside her as they waited for the formal debrief to begin. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "That shot, the 3,000-meter shot, how confident were you that you could make it?" Maya considered the question honestly. "Maybe 15% confident, but sometimes you have to take the shot regardless of the odds." Rivera nodded slowly. "That's the difference between good snipers and great ones. Good snipers take shots they know they can make. Great ones take shots that need to be made." Chief Harrison called the group to attention for the final debrief. As he began discussing the day's lessons learned and the implications for future training, Maya allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She had proven that skill and understanding could compete with technology, that fundamental marksmanship principles still mattered in an age of computerized solutions, and that a modified hunting rifle in the right hands could achieve what most people considered impossible. More importantly, she had earned the respect of operators who represented the pinnacle of American military marksmanship. In a world where reputation was everything, that recognition would open doors and create opportunities she had never imagined. As the debrief concluded and the group prepared to head home, Thompson approached her one final time. "Maya," he said, using her first name for the first time, "that shot today is going to be talked about for years. You've set a standard that people will try to match." Maya smiled and shouldered her rifle case. "Good," she said. "Competition makes everyone better." As she walked toward her vehicle, Maya pulled out her phone to call her grandfather. He would want to hear about the day's events, and she wanted to thank him for the lessons that had made everything possible. The desert sun was setting behind her as she drove away from 29 Palms, carrying with her the knowledge that she had achieved something remarkable. In a single afternoon, she had transformed from an outsider, looking to prove herself, into a marksman whose abilities would be discussed in special operations circles for years to come. And she had done it all with her grandfather's hunting rifle.